Welcome back to New Zero Land. In this video, I want to answer the question, why do electric vehicles take so long to charge? And why don't Zeros have DC fast charging? So why do electric vehicles charge so slowly? Most of the time you'll hear they charge overnight, which sounds ridiculous, right? From the factory, my Zero took 8 hours to charge.
I'm afraid you'll just have to wait.
I hate waiting.
So why is this the case? It's because the outlet you're plugging the bike into is just super low power. That's basically it. The outlet in your garage is like 1.5 kilowatts, and that's just not enough. If you plug in a Tesla, for example,
17 hours for like 30%. That's unbelievable.
Depending on where you are in the world, it might be different. So to find out how much power your outlet's making, you multiply the voltage by the amps. So in the US, it's usually 110 volts and 15 amps. But there's usually a little bit of power loss. So Zero put a 1.3 kilowatt charger on their bike just to make sure that you didn't trip anything. Over in New Zealand, it's 230 volts, but only 10 amps. So you could potentially charge a lot faster, but let's just say you're charging at 1.5 kilowatts. So if your bike has a 12 kilowatt hour battery and you can only charge at 1.5 kilowatts per hour, it's going to take a long time. It's kind of like filling a bucket up with water. Imagine the tap is the outlet and the bucket is your battery. But at home, your tap can only open this much. So if it's doing this kind of thing while you're asleep, whatever, most people don't mind. But if you're on a road trip or something and you want to fill that battery faster, you need a more powerful tap. So let's say you go to a campsite to charge because those outlets have more power than your house. In New Zealand, those are about 3.7 kilowatts, which takes your charging time from 8 hours down to 3 hours. But you can't just have an outlet with more power, you also need a charger on your bike with more power to match it. This is why I bought all those aftermarket DigiNow chargers. If you have 10 kilowatts worth of chargers on your bike, and you find a station that can put out 10 kilowatts, you're in business. You just can't use all 10 kilowatts worth of chargers at home because the outlet at home sucks. So it's just a matter of looking at the size of your battery, using the same amount of kilowatts worth of chargers, and then finding a place to plug in with that much power. This is kind of what Zero did with the SRF. They added the same amount of chargers to match the size of the battery so they could fully charge in 1 hour. If you can find a station with that much power, which 12 kilowatt J stations?
I don't think they exist.
A 1 hour charge might be enough for you. My bike charges in 1 hour, and most of the time it's alright. But when Energica is charged in half that time for the same price as a Zero SRF, you start thinking, how are they doing that? No, they didn't put twice as many chargers on the bike. They use DC fast charging. If you're not familiar with DC charging, it's something most electric cars can do. You either charge them really slowly at home overnight, or out at a public charging station with a lot more power. The Tesla superchargers, for example, those are DC. You can charge up in like half an hour. In fact, they just released an update to allow your Tesla to charge at 1,000 miles per hour, which means an hour worth of charging could get you 1,000 miles of range. It's crazy. So Energica can DC fast charge, the upcoming Harley Livewire can DC charge, as well as the Lightning Strike. They're all going to have CCS. So when Zero announced their new bike, the SRF, all of us were hoping they'd take this opportunity to make it capable of using those stations and capable of charging in half an hour. But they didn't, and it makes me sad. So let's look at a few potential reasons why. Zero is an American company, so they have to cater to the US infrastructure, which means J1772. Those are all over the place, and there just aren't as many DC stations around. But then there are even less 12 kilowatt J stations. So I'm throwing that excuse out, just forget I ever mentioned it. Maybe the batteries get too hot when you DC charge them, so you need liquid cooling. But Energica has DC charging and their batteries are air cooled, so...
I do not accept excuses. I'm just going to have to find myself a new giant, that's all.
The real reason? Zeros are too low voltage to DC charge. See, Zero batteries are 116 volts, and a lot of DC stations in the US don't go that low. Even if they did, the bike would still take an hour to charge. To find out how much power you can get from a DC station, you multiply the station's amps by your battery's voltage. So 125 amps times Zero's 116 volts is 14.5 kilowatts. But the battery is only at 116 volts when it's full. When it's totally dead, it might be around 100 volts. So multiply 125 amps by 100 volts at 0%, and you could only charge at 12.5 kilowatts. So even charging a Zero at a DC station, it would still take an hour. But there is a way. If you run the batteries in parallel, you get more range and the voltage is lower. But if you wanted a DC fast charge, you could flip a switch and run them in series to get higher voltage. So as long as the chemistry allows it, it's totally possible. So you could charge up in half an hour, but then also you wouldn't have to carry around all these multiple AC chargers, which means less weight, more range, more cargo space. Another positive is that you're not creating as much heat on the bike. Chargers get really hot, and when they get hot, they could potentially overheat your battery.
Does not want to charge because it is too hot.
DC stations deal with all that heat off the bike. Sometimes those stations have radiators inside or liquid-cooled cables, so your bike stays cooler while charging faster. So in a totally selfish way, I really want DC charging because in New Zealand, the DC infrastructure is king. ChargeNet is everywhere, and from what I've heard, DC is everywhere in Europe. Really, moving forward, the faster we can charge, the better. So putting only a J port on the bike and no DC just doesn't make sense to me, especially when CCS does both.
Inconceivable!
Right now we have Tesla adapters and we're doing Dub J, and I have like 3 Blue Commando cables for campsites. But this shouldn't be how we approach future models. If the end goal is to build a replacement for gas bikes, then we need to get the charging time down close to filling a gas tank. And the closest we've got so far is DC charging. We can't make bikes that are limited just because the charging infrastructure is limited. I mean, it's 2019. Is an hour charge time really acceptable? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.